Afterlife. The gang deals with the after effects of bringing Buffy back from the dead.
We open with the gang looking for Buffy as the demon bikers flee town. And all of that happened in the last episode.
And it would have been a lot easier to keep track of Buffy if they hadn't let her just run away. And Willow says she must be disoriented after being trapped in a hell dimension where she could have been tortured for years from her perspective.
Meanwhile, Buffy's with Dawn, and they're back at the Summers house. And Buffy's able to talk now, but she still wanders around aimlessly.
Dawn mentions that Giles left and that they will call him and get him back. Spike arrives, and when he sees Buffy, he realizes it's the real her and not the android, and he notes her bloody knuckles and says she escaped from her coffin the same way he did.
They sit down and start to have a real conversation when the rest of the gang busts in and immediately starts making jokes about ordering pizza, which cause Spike to mimic my actions and leave the room.
They try to ask Buffy questions, but she says she'll be okay and just wants to sleep. Dawn finds out they used a spell to bring her back.
And they pretty much demand that she be happy, which I'm sure won't cause any pushback. They also automatically assume she's been in hell, which hasn't been established.
Yeah, I thought that was kind of funny. Xander and Anya go outside, where Anya says she's not convinced that Buffy is okay. And they find Spike, who is very upset that they didn't tell him that they were going to try to bring Buffy back.
He says that Willow knew that something could have gone wrong, and that she was so obsessed with bringing Buffy back that even if something did go wrong, Willow would let it continue. To which Xander disagrees, because he is an idiot.
And Spike leaves angrily, saying there are always consequences to using magic, even though they use magic all the time.
The only consequence is that things are okay by the end of the episode. Inside, Willow has called Giles and informed him of the situation, and he just left the last episode, so apparently he's going to head back in a few days.
At Tara's urging, Willow admits that she's not sure if Buffy is okay, and brings up how messed up Angel was when he came back at the beginning of Season 3.
But they summarily dismiss this case because, quote, Buffy isn't like that. Willow also admits she's annoyed that Buffy isn't being more grateful for what they did.
And Tara says Buffy just needs time. In her room, Buffy looks at photos of her and the gang, and their faces turn into skulls.
It's like an episode of Goosebumps.
She goes into Willow and Tara's room and says she knows what they did, and alludes to Willow killing the fawn in the last episode. And she calls them
bitches! Filthy little bitches rattling the bones.
Which was pretty cool. And her face is in shadow the whole time, which was also pretty cool.
But when Willow turns on the light, Buffy has disappeared. And they go and check on her, and she's still sleeping.
Willow lies and tells Tara she didn't understand what Buffy was talking about. And then they see some kind of force moving along the wall, and decide to call Xander as if he could somehow do something useful.
They also automatically assume it's after Buffy, whatever it is. She uses her 90s phone to call Xander's 90s phone.
When they tell him what happened, he tells them to get out of the house, and while he's talking to them, a white-eyed Anya walks toward him, cutting her face with a knife, which was pretty cool.
Yeah, very Evil Dead.
She suddenly collapses, and the thing that Willow and Tara saw earlier moves out from her across the floor.
The next day, the gang is discussing the incidents and assume that Buffy brought back a demon with her from hell. They say that they'll stop it and continuously reassure Buffy that it's wonderful that she's back.
Despite their interactions being very awkward. Buffy tells them about seeing the photos of them change into skeletons and says she assumed she was just going crazy.
After some research in the dark, they think they know what kind of demon they're dealing with, and Buffy blurts out that she misses Giles.
But Willow says he's coming back. Buffy suddenly says she should go on patrol, and declines to let anyone go with her.
Anya brings in coffee and starts handing it out, which caused Dawn to mimic my actions when someone assumes what drink I would want without asking beforehand.
After she breathes fire, she collapses, and the demon leaves, and Anya says it will be going somewhere with a purpose. But it doesn't do anything before showing up in the same location a couple scenes later.
Buffy's made her way to Spike's crypt, who is still wrestling with the fact that she's back, and he opens up about how much he's thought about her.
At one point he says he keeps seeing the events surrounding Buffy's death every night, and he makes it sound like he's talking about dreams, but why would he be sleeping at night instead of during the day? At the magic shop, Xander asks Tara if Willow might have known that there could be consequences for doing the spell, and Tara says Willow wouldn't do anything to hurt anyone.
At that point, Willow discovers via research that they actually created this demon via the ritual, and it's out of phase with their dimension.
Which is why they can't see it, even though they can see it later.
And they can see a lump moving across the floor.
This episode must have been written by Next Generation writers. And Tara says that's why it needs to borrow other people's bodies or take their form. And Willow says if they send it away, it will cancel out the spell, so Buffy will go back to being dead too.
To which Dawn immediately overreacts and starts wailing about how they can't do that to her, meaning Dawn. But Willow keeps reading the paragraph and discovers that the demon will just go away on its own. And then she finishes the paragraph, which says that it can stick around if it kills Buffy.
And my question was, why wouldn't she have kept reading in the first place before they started theorizing on how to get rid of it? What a bunch of idiots.
And since they're all morons, and the demon was still in the room with them, and had no actual reason to leave, it has heard their entire conversation.
And thanks them in the form of a demon-possessed Xander. It reminded me of I, Robot You, Jane, where Buffy and Giles discussed all the things the demon in the internet could do right in front of the computer that it was in.
Oh, good. I thought you were just going to stop at iRobot. That movie sucked.
At the Summers house, Buffy is confronted by the demon, who takes the form of a white smear of CGI, which reminded me of the movie I, Robot.
Xander, Anya, and Dawn are driving back to the Summers house, assuming that Buffy will be there, and I guess they're lucky that she is, while Willow and Tara are casting a spell to make the demon physically fightable.
And I questioned why Xander and Anya were bringing Dawn with them to the place that the demon is at. That did not make any sense.
The demon is assaulting Buffy physically, but the real cuts are coming emotionally, because she's told that she's the one that doesn't belong, and her friends didn't even give her a choice. Deep cuts, man.
Willow manages to make the demon turn solid, and Buffy still gets smacked around a few times before managing to chop its head off with an axe. Some morning later, Buffy runs out to give Dawn her lunch as she leaves for school.
And Dawn tries to make Buffy feel better in her own super self-centered way.
And Buffy does seem to be getting relatively back to normal, but is annoyed that people keep pestering her about whether she's okay. And Dawn says now that they see her being happy, they'll stop asking, even though she doesn't look happy.
Buffy goes to the magic shop and reveals to everybody that she was indeed in hell, and she's grateful for the gang for bringing her back, and they all hug.
She goes outside and finds Spike sitting in the alley.
And he says he can be out in the daylight because the sun is low enough and he's under an overhang. And when Buffy says she wants to be alone, he goes to leave, but he stops at the sun line. So how did he get there in the first place? I assume he covered his head with his jacket like we've seen before, but as he goes to leave, he makes no motion to do that.
I'm glad you said that because I had that in my notes too. But she says it's okay if he stays. He asks if she's really okay after being in a hell dimension and offers to help if he can, but Buffy reveals that she wasn't in a hell dimension. She was at peace and thinks she was in heaven, but her friends pulled her back to a crappy world that now feels like hell to her.
And she walks away, finishing with the 4 words that have absolutely no meaning in this show.
They can never know.
Afterlife. Overall,
I was really surprised that my prediction about Buffy being in a good place after her sacrifice turned out to be correct. But I am glad that that's the case, because it opens a lot of doors for good writing. But it's up to the writers to do that, and they have not given me a reason to be very optimistic so far. But outside of all of that, I really want to talk about the rest of the characters in this show. It really annoyed me how obvious it was that Buffy needed a lot of time to process and heal, but everybody immediately acted like things were normal simply because she was physically present again. It was an extremely self-centered approach. These people are terrible people and terrible friends, and commanding everybody, including Buffy herself, to be happy was the icing on the cake. They masked the whole scenario like it was for Buffy's benefit when it was really for their own benefit. And when there were slivers of self-realization, they are immediately squashed and cast aside. And instead, they get miffed that Buffy isn't acting more grateful. They're really taking advantage of being able to control her, and she's always been a very headstrong character. Statements like, "You're not supposed to be awake," and "You should be happy," really hits the nail on the head. And there's a ton of passive aggressiveness flying around, like when they said, "Well, Buffy, it's your fault that we have to deal with this demon, but seriously, it's great that you're back." And for endlessly repeating that they're concerned about her welfare, but then letting her go off on her own to patrol without any real pushback, especially when they know there's this new demon out there, shows how little they actually care about her. They care about themselves. They let her go patrol because they're saying, well, that's her job. I'm kind of annoyed that we had to do that for so long when she selfishly sacrificed herself. And when the conversation about how eliminating the demon would cause Buffy to die again comes up, Dawn immediately starts shouting about how unfair that is to her, and how could they think of taking Buffy away from her. And after Buffy kills the demon, and everything is bright and sunny again, Dawn throws a huge guilt trip at her by saying, "Everything was bad when you were gone, but now everybody can see you happy. Not, we want you to actually be happy, but instead, we want to see you act happy. So you better act happy, you ungrateful bitch." Spike was the only one who ever asked Buffy if he could do something for her, and genuinely seemed to care about how she was feeling. So it appears that Spike and Buffy will actually have an organic way to get closer, which, the writers have wanted to do since he showed up, and it only took until, the end of the show to find out how to do it, so well done, I guess. And it pains me to say it, but that was really the only compelling part of this episode for me. I guess Willow potentially going down a darker path would also be interesting to see, and the Evil Dead stuff was cool too. I look forward to everybody finding out that they f***ed up big time. I wouldn't be surprised if Buffy left by choice, out of resentment. And knowing how these characters now are, instead of any self-reflection, they would probably say, well, how ungrateful is that? We went through all the work of murdering all these deer to bring her back, and she just left anyway. Or they'll just make dumb, insensitive jokes right to her face. That would be in line for this show. I liked this episode for the potential it brought up for future episodes, but I disliked it for its own content. So I graded this one really low. I think we're probably going to disagree on this one. I gave this one a D+.
Wow, okay.
Because everyone's an asshole.
I mean, that's true. You gave the last pair of episodes a higher grade than I did. This is a more dramatic difference. I gave it a B. I was glad they didn't just get right back to Buffy being back and everything being normal again.
But that's what everyone else wanted.
Yeah, and I agree that they're all assholes, but that's who they've been.
Yeah, but they're different kinds of assholes now.
Yeah, that's true. I'm not saying I like them. I definitely don't like them. But I did like the way this episode was put together. I thought the reveal of her not being in a Hell Dimension was great. It changes the dynamic between her and the rest of the characters in a really interesting way. But I really hope they don't treat things the way they usually do when Buffy starts moping about stuff, because that usually ends up being really boring and really repetitive. I thought the explanation for the demon was pretty dumb, but I really liked how they handled its depiction. Like you said, it felt like Evil Dead, at least up until they decided to have it manifest as a CGI blob at the end, which was really lame. That form at the end, combined with the uninteresting fight between Buffy and the demon, made for kind of an anticlimax, which is disappointing, but I was glad they went with a more serious tone overall for this episode, although there were still some dumb jokes and awkward lines. But the horror elements with the demon were much more creative and effective than usual, and I really enjoyed them. And I thought Sarah Michelle Gellar's acting was good in this episode as well. I thought they succeeded at hiding the real reason why Buffy was acting the way she was. So I agree that the characters are pieces of shit, but I thought the more serious tone, it doesn't make me like them more, but it made me enjoy the episode.
This episode made me angry.
Okay, I was pleasantly surprised. So for me, this is the first time that the opening of a season has felt like it had some momentum that lasted past the first episode.
Agreed.
So I'm hoping the show does in fact get better from this point on, because there definitely is a lot of potential with what they are setting up.
And that would be ironic, because wasn't the show supposed to end after season 5?
They weren't sure if it was going to end or not, so they left that as a possible ending.
The show finally gets good once they think it's going to get canceled.
And back when I watched this was the season that I especially liked. So we'll see if that still holds true.
They need to put in a recurring arc where somewhere in each episode, Willow is eating venison. So they'll be researching a new demon, and she'll be like, "So what do you think we should do about it?"
No, they should just have like a shot in the background where she opens the freezer and there's just a lot of meat in there. And just not address it.
Or maybe the deer comes back as a demon or something.
That would be interesting.
And in the opening of the episode, Willow will open the door and she'll see it, and she'll go, "Oh dear."
Oh man. Okay, I was hoping you were just going to say that they'll kill the demon and then just eat it.
That too, that would be good. So I just read that they're doing a sequel series with Sarah Michelle Gellar. Did you see that?
I did. I didn't really look into it.
Yeah, I guess she's not going to be a huge part of it.
I know she talked before about kind of wanting to distance herself from it a little bit. I mean, that's still what she's most known for. I know she's in some like newer stuff, but I couldn't tell you what it is.
Yeah, I get that if you're so associated with something you want to break, but after enough time has passed and enough money is thrown at you, you're probably going to say yes. I mean, how many times has Hugh Jackman said, "I'm done doing Wolverine"?
Yeah, that's true. And hopefully the show won't suck this time.
How cool would it be if we finished up talking about this series right when that one happened? But then I'd probably have to pay for another streaming service just to watch it.
Yeah, I was going to say, you guys can find out what we think of it when we review it in 25 years.